This footage was actually shot like this, 100% handheld and stabilized later with this free app, Gyroflow. If you too want to achieve this wizardry, you're going to need a camera that records gyro data within it. A bunch of Sony cameras do this, including the a7S III and the a7C, and even cheaper ones like the ZV-E10. But there's a bunch of non-branded Sony cameras that are also supported. Better to check out the full list on Gyroflow's website to make sure that your particular camera is listed there. Gyro data is always recorded in the background of every single clip that you capture with any of these cameras. But here's the big caveat to this method. This technique will only work effectively if you turn off your camera's in-body internal stabilization before you do your shot. Because if you don't and you try to stabilize it after the fact, it weirdly starts to look even more handheld. I guess the app is trying to do stabilization over the top of stabilization, hence why it doesn't look so great. Before you do your shot, you also have to make sure that your shutter speed is even higher than the usual rule of having it double the frame rate that you shoot at. This is because that nice motion blur that you originally captured in your shot doesn't get removed when you stabilize your image. So the intensity and direction of the motion blur won't match up anymore with how your camera is now smoothly moving. It is a bit frustrating that you have to know for sure that you're going to be stabilizing the footage in Gyroflow before you do your shot. But if you ever find yourself in a gimbal-less situation, there's at least a super convincing way to replicate this effect as you're about to see. So let's walk through an example of how we do this. So I'm here with my lovely girlfriend, Henriette, and oh, I've forgotten my gimbal. Oh, but it's fine because I don't even need a gimbal anymore to get those super silky smooth shots. So let's go ahead and set the shutter speed to 1/200. Basically, the higher that it is, the better it's going to be. So then you eliminate as much motion blur as possible when you're doing your actual shot, because we're going to be adding this back in post. Lastly, I'll head into the quick menu of my a7S III to ensure that all in-body stabilization is turned off. And now we're ready to shoot. It helps if you can envision how this shot may look once it's been stabilized. So I suggest you frame a little wider than you would if you were shooting with a gimbal. So the software has some room to crop in to get the best stabilization results. The more it can crop in and the smoother your initial shot, the more chance that you're going to be able to get rid of those nasty jitters from my hand and footsteps. So Henny, come and walk towards me. Let's have a look at how that looks. Yeah, nothing like a gimbal at all, but it will once we put it into the Gyroflow software. Let's go. Now, there's two ways that you can use Gyroflow. One is in its dedicated app where you basically import the file, do the stabilization, then export it back out, newly stabilized in a new format. But the way that I like to use it is directly within DaVinci Resolve because it's my workflow of choice and the whole interface and UI is just really sleek and painless. There's also a Gyroflow plugin for Final Cut Pro, but there isn't one for Premiere Pro, so sorry Adobe users, they don't like you. Let's import the clip that we just shot directly into our media pool. This one here was my favorite take for the stabilization. Just a note, this is a proxy file just to make sure that you guys see completely smooth playback once I've added the stabilization in. Let's choose the start and end points of where Henny starts to walk, and then when she finishes her walk, make a new timeline, Gyroflow. And then we can import this file into the timeline. And now this is where we can start adding in the magic of Gyroflow stabilization. We need to make sure that we have the Gyroflow plugin for DaVinci Resolve installed. You can get it from Gyroflow's official website. And then once we do, we can hop into the Fusion page of this specific clip, find the Gyroflow plugin. So let's type in Gyroflow, and then it gets added directly to our node structure. Now you can see the Gyroflow UI panel on the right hand side boot up. First thing you've got to do is press load for current file. And then as you can see, the shot kind of changed a little bit. And that's because it actually has already done a stabilization of the clip. So we can play that back. And look, it already looks super, super stable, right? Let's remind ourselves what the original looked like. So this was the original. Not very nice at all. Shaky as hell. And then let's just turn this on now. And wow, already literally looks like a gimbal. It's pretty crazy. So if you're happy with that, amazing, because you could just click on the edit page and then start your editing again, get back to work. But there's way more that we can do to tweak and refine it to make the stabilization even better than this. We can mess around with the sliders here to make it even smoother. It'll obviously crop in more. Another really cool thing is that if we hit stabilization overview, we can see what the stabilization software is doing. This is such a cool view. Like, I sometimes just click on this just to see how much of a difference it's making from taking the original footage to then stabilizing it, and it looks so cool like this. And then if we want, we can mess around with the smoothness more. Maybe like we want to crop in a bit more just to refine and make the actual stabilization even smoother than it was before. You know, we can mess around with the position to give Henny a little bit more headroom. And again, if we hit this, we can really see, you know, what each element is doing, how much more room we have to play around with from the original shot. Play it back, and if you like it, then amazing. What a great gimbal shot that we didn't shoot with a gimbal. For quick stabilization, this is all you really need to do, but if you want to take this footage to the next level, I'd recommend doing this next step. So let's hit the open in Gyroflow button, and then this file will open up within the normal Gyroflow app. Sometimes it does this, but don't worry, we're going to fix that. Basically, the first thing you've got to do is choose the lens profile. So whatever lens and camera combination you shot on, try and find something that is either exactly the same or equivalent. And what this is going to do is just going to help the stabilization understand the focal length that you shot in and understand kind of the sensor of your camera, and it will just help make that stabilization a little bit better. So for me, I shot this on Sony a7S III 24mm Sigma. So looking here, this is pretty much what I shot in. And there we go, we can actually see our video properly here in the software. There's a whole bunch more that you can do with this app, little tweaks to the way that the stabilization has been processed, or if there's any weird bugs in the stabilization, you can kind of troubleshoot it within here. But luckily we don't need to do that. On this occasion, it's all been stabilized properly. A lot of times you don't really need to hop in and do crazy tweaks like that. It's pretty good at already doing a really good track. So once we've done that, let's hit this arrow button. And then we need to export the file, including the processed gyro data. So basically the lens profile that we did, it's going to export that out for us. And now it's created a new file, which is, it's not the video file. It's a .gyroflow file type, that just has data in it. So then DaVinci can read it, and we can use it within DaVinci again. And then to apply this lens profile onto the file within DaVinci, we've got to hit load for current file again. Don't forget to do this or else it won't work. And it's looking incredibly smooth, gimbal-like, I would say. You can also do things with the horizon here, because as you can see, there's maybe some moments where you can see a little bit of jolting, you can see a little bit of my footsteps being applied. So I'm gonna go even more with the smoothness. I'm also going to do the horizontal lock, so it kind of just corrects for any rolls. You can experiment with this. Like some shots it needs more, some shots it needs less. So just tweak it yourself and play back and see how it looks for you. Also remember in Fusion, right click here and take off high quality if you're using a non-proxy file, if you're struggling to play it back, and it should help you out. You can also hit proxy here or auto proxy, and it will basically like display it as a proxy file. Depending on how well you kept the original shot steady, it can put a fairly heavy crop on your shot to help keep it smooth. Hence why when we were outside, I originally did the shot a bit wider than I would have usually done if I actually had a physical gimbal in my hand doing the shot. But you can also mess around with the position offset and field of view controls, so you find the right balance of the shot looking framed up properly and also the stabilization being applied in a way that makes it look like it is a silky smooth gimbal shot. Now we're happy with our stabilization. We want to do a final touch, which is to add back in that motion blur that we originally took out of the image when we shot with a higher shutter speed of 1/200. You can do this with DaVinci's built-in motion blur effect, but I find that the results don't look quite as natural as using a paid plugin like Real Smart Motion Blur. So if you do have the cash, pick it up, but if not, it's fine. You'll get away with using DaVinci's motion blur effect. Mess around with the settings until it starts to look natural. Less is usually better with this plugin, or else it'll start to look quite heavy. Play things back to see how it's looking, and you're done. Your amazing looking gimbal shot without ever even touching a gimbal. Here's how the shot would look if I tried to stabilize it with DaVinci's own inbuilt stabilizer. And here's how it looks if I have the image stabilization of the camera turned on. I mean, it doesn't look completely terrible or even unusable, but there's definitely some weird warping and distortion in the background as the software tries to figure out which way the camera was moving and how to better correct it to actually look stable. One thing to note is that depending on how well you shot the original footage, you might still see a few footstep kind of jitters and shakes even after stabilizing it. Oftentimes these are really sudden micro jolts that happen when your foot impacts on the ground, and then that just shakes through the whole camera. So when you do shoot your footage, make sure that you do the heel toe gimbal walk, which is when you walk by exaggerating your heel rolling from heel to toe, rather than letting your heel strike the ground in a less controlled manner like you do with your everyday walk. I hope I've helped to expand your mind for what your camera is capable of doing without a gimbal. Personally, I'm probably not going to do this method for any professional shoots, because digital stabilization, for now anyway, is never really going to be able to compete with what an actual physical gimbal is going to be able to do. But if I'm just traveling and I want to capture some cool shots for some general B-roll or social media content, the fact I can turn off my camera's internal in-body stabilization, crank up that shutter speed, do that shot, get it corrected and stabilized in post to look super convincingly like a gimbal feels pretty much like cheating, and that we're living in an amazing time to be a filmmaker. All without having to lug around a heavy-ass gimbal that's gonna make my back crack in places that only a 90-year-old man's back should be cracking. If you wanna get even faster with your video edits, you should check out this video where I show you an incredibly speedy workflow that I use on all of my projects. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already, because if you do, me and Gimbal Eliza are gonna sleep sound and softly tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.